Hi, you're listening to The Cardigan, a special series from Selfie focusing on the intersection of psychology and self-care. I'm Kristen, a licensed therapist, a skilled catastrophizer, and mom of 4.
And I'm Matthias, a licensed therapist, side-eye aficionado, and a dog dad.
We're going to be taking your mental health questions, chatting about our own journeys, and looking at psychology in the media.
We hope you learned something about yourself, the people you love, and the world of mental health. And maybe laugh a little along the way.
So go grab some tea.
And your favorite cardigan.
And we'll meet you on the couch. Hey guys, well, today on The Cardigan, presented by Selfie, we're going to be answering a listener question that I think is very interesting, that I've heard a lot of friends talking about, which is sexual identity, middle schoolers, high schoolers, and what seems to be a whole lot of kids identifying as maybe not straight. And how do we leave room for growth without locking them into an identity? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about psychology and pop culture, specifically, why is TikTok so addicting? But first, Matthias and I are going to do a little mental health check-in. Hey, Matthias.
Hey, Kristen.
Well, how has your mental health been this week?
You know, it's been a mix. So I think last week we were talking about you doing intensives.
Yes.
I recently got done doing an intensive as well.
Yeah.
I work for an organization called the Allender Center.
So talk explain what that is. I know what it is, but I think our listeners don't.
It's an organization. They're heavily on the Christian side. So if you're not like faith-based, it may not be the place for you. But working with survivors of abuse, and pretty significant abuse, that's kind of the specialty that Dr. Dan Allender, who kind of founded the center, is really good with abuse. And so I'm a facilitator, I'm a fellow with them, and we do, it's almost once a month during the winter months, weekend intensives, working with people around their stories of harm and abuse, using kind of Dr. Allender's methodology. And it's incredible work, but it's exhausting. We're working with stories that it would just blow your mind.
I can't even imagine.
Survived. Yeah.
And are you guys, is it an intensive thing? You know, are you spending like a bunch of hours with one client, or how does it work practically?
Yeah, we do it as groups.
Okay.
And so typically there's between 5 and 7 people in a group with a facilitator. And everyone kind of writes a story of their abuse, 800 to 1,000 words.
Oh, wow.
And then we do narrative-based work on those stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you walk out of an experience like that and maintain kind of like, you know, do you have any practices or ways that you get back to feeling grounded after dealing with such heavy subject matter?
Yeah, it's a mix of things for me. One is I like save up episodes of RuPaul's Drag Race.
That feels right.
For my evenings. Yeah,
that feels right.
Every night I'm watching Drag Race.
Yeah. So you have something to look forward to, and it's light and it's entertaining.
Right. And it's so like I said, it's a pretty evangelical space. I mean, I'm there for a reason. Like, I feel comfortable there. But it's one of the few places in my life where I'm not surrounded by queer people.
Yeah.
And so it's just like helpful to be like, okay, I can breathe again. Here are my queer friends on the TV. So that, and then I haven't been very good at it these last few months just because things have been wild, but I'll usually try to take the day after off. I'll usually try to get a massage to kind of work with my body, because I know I store things in my body, and I store what clients tell me in my body. So to kind of work through and work out some of that, I try. I'm not good at that, but that's the attempt.
I'm curious because in my check-in, I'm going to talk about body stuff. When you say you store it in your body, how does it manifest for you?
Yeah, it's a mix of things. I'll notice often in my shoulders and in my gut. And so I always feel weird asking my massage therapist, like, can you like massage my stomach? But like it really helps. He'll
Yeah.
like get in there and work
Yeah.
with some of the muscle and some of the tissue underneath. And it's amazing just the releasing that I'll feel in that, because I mean, I deeply believe we hold and store things in our bodies. It's not just mental.
Fully.
And so when we can physically open those places up,
Yeah.
it helps.
Oh, it really does. We when I was at Onsite, the last time I was doing an intensive, they actually brought a masseuse in for the therapist one night.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it was really nice to just, after a very long day of very emotional, I mean, generally speaking, when you're doing especially an intensive, if someone has decided, I'm going to take time and money away to come to something, there's usually a pretty big crisis going on.
Right.
It's usually pretty heavy and tense. And so, yeah, it was really nice to kind of have that opportunity to get a massage, unwind at the end of the day. And I think doing therapy work, like, you need a lot of downtime.
Yep.
I do anyway.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, same.
Yeah. Okay, I want to touch on one thing that you said really quick, and I know this is a super loaded question, but you mentioned you guys do narrative stuff. Give me this is so absurd. Give me a paragraph of what narrative means.
Yeah. So
Or more.
From an Allenderian perspective, because it can mean, like, anytime anyone says narrative-based therapy, it can mean a billion different things.
Yeah.
But from an Allender perspective, and the way I'm trained in it, is we believe that the DNA of our stories show up in every story. So when we take a sliver of, someone writes 800 to 1,000 words of a single experience in their life, that story contains the DNA of their entire life story. And when you're trained and able to read a story well, which is essentially basic attunement.
Yeah.
Being able to
Empathy.
to look at the details and see, like, well, if this is true, then this is also likely true, and so on and so forth. You can really start to ask questions of what was actually going on in this story. Because, I mean, we know, especially as kids, we turn against ourselves before we turn against our parents. And so how do we kind of retell the story in a way that actually will maybe assign some of the blame where it's due? And it's not like a blame your parents for everything kind of thing, but more of as kids, we turn against ourselves. Often it's not our fault.
Yeah. And we assign shame and blame to ourselves.
Right.
And then we walk around with that, with everything.
With everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it particularly with abuse, it gets
Yes.
solidified in some pretty insidious ways.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And then those narratives around who you are as a person, they infuse into every relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really like narrative work a lot.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. How have you been, Kristen? I know, you've been very busy.
I've been very busy. Yeah, I have been. But it was interesting that you talked about, holding stress in the body, because that is something I do. And that's something that I've really been wanting to address. I am someone who I've been under a lot of stress over the last couple of years, the divorce kind of kicking things off and then right into a pandemic. That was fun. And I'm just holding it in my body. And that's manifesting for me in, first of all, TMJ. I'm clenching my jaw constantly, unaware that I'm doing it. But then second of all, IBS, which I've talked about, which is, for me, what that looks like is I have constant abdominal discomfort. And I've had all the tests. There's nothing physically wrong. It's just that my stomach is in knots all the time. And it used to be, it would be in knots when I was under a lot of stress, but now this is like kind of how I'm living. So I finally was like, dude, I got to do something about this. And so I am seeing a therapist at a place called the Pain Psychology Center. They're located in LA, but they do telehealth right now. And they specifically work with physical psychosomatic pain. So things like back pain, IBS, any kind of pain that's chronic and constant. And they help work on just kind of resetting those neural pathways that we've gotten into. So for anybody who's listening, I'm 2 sessions in, but I'm really buying it. I'm really liking it. So if you don't have access to see a therapist at this place, they have a book that is really good. It's written by Alan Gordon. It's called The Way Out. And he kind of details this whole idea of pain reprocessing therapy, which is like this mind-body protocol that I am working through. But I'm really liking it. And I feel like I'm finally addressing this pain that doctors have just not had a clue what to do with.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. So what does a session kind of look like then?
Well, yeah. So I'm right at the beginning, and so first session, we kind of went over all my pain points. But in my last session, we talked about triggers. So when do I notice that I'm having pain more? When do I notice that I'm not having pain? And some of it is wild. It's not even necessarily stress. It's like one time I had pain in a specific place, and now every time I go to that place, I feel that pain. Or if, I notice that I'm not in a lot of pain when I'm with friends, but when I'm sitting at my desk, I have a lot of pain. Or if I'm nervous about something, then I start noticing it. So we're looking at triggers right now. And then it's a lot of psychoeducation too, just about, neural pathways, and body scanning is a big one for me. I do a lot of body scanning, which is looking for pain, like being oversensitive to it and anticipating it.
Sure.
And so getting me out of those loops. And then talking about my past. So one of the things that has been a very kind of sad revelation for me is that my body scanning really started when I was having recurrent pregnancy loss. So what would happen is I would, be fearful that I would have another miscarriage. And then every time I got pregnant, I would just spend my entire day thinking, did I feel a twinge? Do I feel a cramp? Am I just constantly scanning out of fear. And then when I had a lot of miscarriages, but then when I did carry India to term and Karis to term, that was 9 months of body scanning. My entire pregnancy I spent wondering if every kick was a cramp, if, every twinge was a contraction too early. Right. And so recognizing how those patterns of body scanning, I never gave those up. Not consciously.
Right.
But yeah, I'm still doing it. I'm still looking at my body all day. It's just running in the back of my mind unconsciously. So now we're trying to undo that.
Wow.
Wild, right?
That's so wild in the ways that we adapt.
Yeah.
and for better, for worse. And yeah.
But yeah, I definitely, if anyone is dealing with this kind of thing, I definitely recommend, and I'll link this up, the book. It's called The Way Out, A Revolutionary Scientifically Proven Approach to Healing Chronic Pain. And what I do like about this too is it's evidence-based. There's nothing woo-woo, this is all based in real science. It's not like a manifesting myself out of pain situation. Sure. It's not The Secret.
Have you read? I don't even want to go to The Secret. I almost went that direction. But have you read The Brain's Way of Healing?
No.
By Norman Dodge. He's a medical doctor. It sounds really similar to what you're talking about, but maybe more of a maybe more of a like theoretical as opposed to the practical. Of like neuroplasticity and the way that relates to pain, and it's fascinating the ways our brains change and our bodies change.
Well, another good book on this topic is The Body Keeps the Score.
Yes, right. Yeah.
And a lot of people have read that one. It's such a good book, but one thing I've heard from a lot of people is like, okay, I read it, I buy it, I agree, now what? And I would say this book, The Way Out, is the now what.
Yeah.
Like it's a little bit more practical.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a one thing to read about it, and it's another thing to then try to do it.
Yes. Yeah.
Entirely different things.
Absolutely. Especially if you're trying to do it on your own.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I mean, if people are feeling like this resonates, you know, it's a great opportunity right now because everything is online. Where it used to be, you'd have to go to Beverly Hills to go to the center. I'll link all of that up. One of the things I've talked about in my own journey of self-care has been that struggle to eat well, eat healthy foods, and move my body and exercise. MyFitnessPal has been a really great tool for me to find the motivation to do this. And I know I also thought it was just for counting calories, but MyFitnessPal actually teaches about nutrition and fitness habits and helps me create new ones that stick, which is very motivating. MyFitnessPal is not a rigid diet plan. Instead, you gradually learn from personalized data about what works for you. And if your version of healthy looks different from mine or someone else's, that's okay. MyFitnessPal's premium membership is great. This is the one I have, and I get custom tools and expert guidance to help me reach my personal goals my way. So if you're into micro tracking, you're doing the low carb thing, you're looking for heart health, whatever it is that you want, you can stick to it more easily. One of the aha moments that I've really had from using MyFitnessPal was tracking my exercise and my sleep and noticing, which is no big surprise, when I exercise, I sleep better. And with MyFitnessPal, you're not going it alone. You have access to guided daily workouts and meal plans written by dietitians and exercise scientists. Plus, you get support from other members who have shared goals and experiences. MyFitnessPal does way more than count calories. For a limited time, they're offering listeners 3 months of their premium membership for free. If you're already a member, no problem. You can still claim this offer. Get your premium membership by going to selfie.myfitnesspal.com and use the code SELFIE to get 3 months for free. That's selfie.myfitnesspal.com, code SELFIE. Again, that's selfie.myfitnesspal.com. Today's sponsor is a genius way to supercharge both the taste and health benefits of your daily Java. Chagachino is your coffee's new friend with benefits. Just add 1 packet of the Chagachino mix into your regular coffee or latte and transform it into an adaptogenic superfood mushroom-based mocha. It is delicious, vegan, keto, and has no sugar or calories. It's made of 100% wild foraged chaga, as in mushrooms, and also has raw cacao, Ceylon cinnamon, and it's sweetened with monk fruit. They recommend it with 2 shots of espresso, 1 packet of the Chagachino mix, and plant-based milk over ice, just like a latte. But I can attest it is equally delicious in my morning iced matcha. You might be wondering how a mushroom-based coffee product tastes, but it really does taste great, like mocha ice cream and cinnamon toast crunch had a baby. Chaga is crazy high in antioxidants. Each packet has the antioxidant equivalent of 3 pounds of blueberries, so it's amazing for immune support. Researchers have found that medicinal mushrooms have demonstrated both antiviral and anti-inflammatory activity. Recently, it's even been researched as a potential effective treatment against COVID-19 with promising results, most likely due to its anti-inflammatory properties. Also, chaga is the most alkaline food on the planet due to its vast mineral content. Chagachino chaga has more potassium than bananas, more germanium than turmeric. It's really good for you. You can visit drinkrenewed.com, that's nude as in naked, and use the promo code SELFIE at checkout to get 15% off Chagachino orders. That's drinkrenewed.com, promo code SELFIE at checkout for 15% off your Chagachino order. All right, should we get into this question?
Let's do it. Yeah, I'm so excited about this question.
I'm excited about this question too, but I feel like it's very loaded. So this was a listener question. Sexual identity with middle schoolers. 25% of my daughter's friends are not straight, including my daughter. How do we leave room for growth without locking her into an identity? And I have to say that in mom circles, I am hearing this question more and more. Now, it's not coming from a place of, oh my gosh, what do I do if my child is, queer? It's coming from a place of like, wow, these numbers seem really high, right? Like all of my kids' friends are identifying as LGBT. And like, are they really all? And what do we do with this? And do we question or, how do we approach what feels like a lot more kids than were the case when we were kids coming out or identifying this way?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that speaks to just the shift, the cultural shift that we're in, of where middle schoolers, kids are in places where they can explore these things. And
Yep.
and they are. And
Yeah.
in my mind, I think that's wonderful, but it doesn't take away the like how confusing it can be
Yeah.
for them and for us as caregivers.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. I think one of the pieces of advice that I have given on this is, I feel like the answer is just always a yes and when your kid comes to you. Like, you're never going to harm them by just listening, but you could harm them by questioning.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So like maybe my kid comes to me and says, I think I'm bi, and they're 11 and they've never kissed somebody. And in my mind, I'm like, maybe you should have some experience before you decide. But, but like if I question them, they'll never forget that.
Right.
Whereas if I just go, okay, we'll see where in my head, not out loud, we'll see where this all lands. But I express like, I support you, whatever, great. That's not going to stick with them. But I think we can do real harm if we question our child's reality on this stuff.
Yeah.
Even if we do think, I'm not sure if this is quite solidified yet at this age.
Totally. And I think where my mind goes is this level of kind of concreteness. I think teenagers especially, very concrete in the ways they think and the ability to kind of put labels.
Yes.
And this is what's going on. This is who I am now. But the reality of that can shift, weekly, daily.
Yes.
But I think some of our work as caregivers, I'm thinking more from therapeutic, but I think this is true for parents too, is to be able to hold the space of where we're not concretizing, but we're also not questioning their concreteness.
Yes.
Of where we can hold off some of those bigger questions of, is this true? What do I need to do? Blah, blah, blah. And more kind of hold that space of the exploration is happening and how do we support in that exploration instead of shut down?
Yes. Now, here's a question, because I do know, middle school behavior is to group and sort. We know that. I mean, it's, we go back to the preps versus the socias versus,
Yep.
That is middle school and high school behavior, or the jocks versus, for time immemorial, we've been sorting in middle school and high school. And I do notice that there is a lot of pressure on kids right now to sort around their sexual identity. And if we notice that we have a child who maybe isn't sure or isn't fixed yet, or maybe even is in, some kids are late bloomers. There are some kids at 11, 12 that they haven't maybe even experienced a crush yet.
Right.
And if we notice our kid is being pressured by peers to, stake their position, like, you got to pick, or what I've experienced with one child is peers have explained to them what they are. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do we help kids, be able to kind of give themselves room and space?
Yeah. It's so much pressure.
It is.
On something that is so complicated.
And so personal.
Right.
Yeah.
And, sexuality and gender, these are things that, even as adults, we're trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Let alone as teenagers.
Yeah.
I go back to the question of like, what does it look like to kind of model some of these conversations of maybe not like lecture your kids on the realities of this is what gender's like, this is what sexuality is like. Mm-hmm. There's a spectrum. Yeah. It can take you years, but more model that kind of space of curiosity. Yeah. Of, I wonder what's actually going on. Of course, with some education in there too. But, helping our kids have a curious response instead of like, this is what it has to be. And if you don't know, then you're bad or, whatever.
Yeah. We have one kid where they were feeling very pressured to know where they stood. And I think there's certain circles where that pressure is a little higher. I'll like, just be frank, like, I think the theater kids are this is a conversation that is like top of mind. And if you're a theater kid by 11 or 12, you need to know your identity and it's niche, it's like,
Yep. Right.
and, we just had that conversation of exactly what you said. Like, you need to stay curious. Like, if you don't know yet, then you need to tell your friends you don't know yet, and it's okay. And we want you to explore, and we want you to go out, you're not old enough yet, but like, go out and have relationships with people and have experiences with people. And that's how you're going to figure out, not in some debate with your friends at theater class, but like being in relationship with people.
Yeah.
And finding out who makes your heart flutter. And, you're not going to know that. Right. Maybe. I know some people know much earlier, but, totally. For this child, they really didn't know. Mm-hmm. And then were feeling like they were being assigned. But so I like that, like, it feels like if we're giving them the gift of curiosity, that's not questioning them, that's broadening. Like, yes. We're sending them out into the world to figure it out, as opposed to, well, you don't know anything yet, and I'm questioning your reality.
Yeah. And I think that applies really well for these questions about sexuality. I think I would caveat the question around gender. And some of a lot of trans people that I work with, know from a very early age, not all, but know from a very early age that things are not right with their bodies.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest gifts that we can do as caregivers is, obviously consult with professionals, get people in there who can, really help. But like, there are like things that you can do around gender, whether it's puberty blockers or other things to give your child more space to figure that out without there being, like, in some ways irreparable harm. Once we go through puberty, we can't change that. And so if a kid was really like, I don't want to go through this, like, it's important to pay attention to that.
Yeah. And then I think also understanding that there's a whole spectrum of gender expression as well, because I think we can even be, if this makes sense, we can be binary in gender expression. So it's like, okay, my kid is either cisgender or they're trans.
Right.
And not understanding that there might be spectrums in the middle.
Right. And there are huge spectrums in the middle.
Yeah. And then giving them the freedom to, be in that spectrum as well. Because I do think kids are feeling that pressure too. Like, they might feel a little fluid, and then suddenly their peers are like, you're trans.
Right.
Where, well, maybe they're in a middle space of fluidity.
Yeah.
But it's hard. And, I find it also difficult because as, young people, they know everything. They think they know everything, so they've watched some TikToks and they know everything about gender and sexuality, even though they've never had sex yet.
Right.
So I always find that a little interesting, but, you have to stay respectful, but also recognize that they're going to flounder. And it's, it's the blind leading the blind.
Yep.
It's, a bunch of middle schoolers explaining sexuality to other middle schoolers.
Yep.
Which is always a disaster. But that's also something that has always happened, right?
Yeah,
like,
right.
Children have, unfortunately, often always learned about sex from peers.
Yep.
Do you have any good resources for, on that note, for talking about, sexuality and gender with kids before their peers do, so that they're coming into these conversations a little more equipped?
Yeah, I know I've already mentioned this book in one of our episodes, but like that book by Tina Schermer Sellers, the Shameless Parenting book, I just think is so helpful with these conversations. That really is my go-to book for what's quote unquote appropriate and what's not.
Yeah. And I think, I always feel like we serve our kids well when they've heard it from us before their peers. Yeah. So if for people listening that have kids, approaching middle school, these conversations happen in middle school. Mm-hmm. It cracks me up when people are arguing about like education around, gender and sexuality, because if you think that they're not going to learn this just by nature of being in middle school, you are delusional.
Yeah. Right.
They're all talking about this.
Yep.
I mean, every single one of my kids knows all of the definitions, all of the things. And so, your best bet is to talk to them first and explain all of it first and give them a better education so that when they are in these conversations, they know they're not learning from other kids who are also potentially misinformed.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you can be the place where your kids can come to and ask questions,
right.
that can help so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think consuming media where, LGBT and trans people are featured is important, just making sure that there's representation in your house. In different ways is also important too. I know like my daughter, actually all my kids read a book called, oh my gosh, I can't think of the name. It's about a trans kid. It's one word, maybe Charlie. I'll think of it and I'll link it up. I've talked about it on here before, but it's just a little young adult novel, and it's empathy building. And then they understood what that meant. And I think they read it when they were like 9 or 10, And then there's an earlier one about crayons. Do you know that one?
Oh, it rings a bell. I think I know what one you're talking about, but I don't remember the name.
It's like a crayon that has a red package, but it colors in blue.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that was just a really cute one just for understanding, I think, again, we say this all the time, but these conversations just have to be ongoing conversations.
Right.
At different developmental stages. But I think that's really helpful too.
There's another really good book. It's a memoir, and I think it's semi-related, at least for parents who are like, I want to at least learn a little bit about these conversations before I have them with my kids. There's a book by a person named Dr. Kyle Myers, Kyl Myers, who is gender fluid themselves. But they had a child and chose to raise this child gender neutral, or to allow their child to choose their gender, as they were getting older. And it's a memoir. The book's called Raising Them. And I think it's really helpful because Dr. Kyle is a sociologist. And so they, both explain a lot of the theory and a lot of the, reality around gender in the book, but also some of the practicality of just parenting.
Yeah.
And you may not want to, raise your child gender neutral, but it will at least help you into some of those conversations, I think.
Yeah.
So that's a great resource as well.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. The book I was thinking of is George. That's the name of it is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it was, my kids really liked that book. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll link that one up too. Yeah. These are all very interesting conversations. And, it's so new and it's so different. And I do love that kids are feeling so much freedom now. The stigma is just, the stigma that was present when I was their age is just not there.
Yep.
It's not there.
Which is so cool.
So cool. Yeah. I mean, my kids are going to their gay straight alliance at school, and that's a cool club. That's not a misfit club. That's a cool club.
Right.
I love it.
Yeah. I wonder if we also need to caveat, though, that we're on the coast.
You're right. You're so right.
Yeah. And I hear so many stories of where it is still hell in the Midwest and other places.
You're absolutely right on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. We are in California and Seattle.
Yep.
And that is not the case everywhere. That is absolutely true. Yeah. I do feel encouraged by, while it's not the case everywhere, I think that media representation has really changed a lot too.
Yes.
And I hope that that's helping kids in those isolated places.
Totally. Especially, I feel like this leads us right into our question, or our pop culture question, but especially TikTok.
Yes, especially TikTok.
Yeah.
I mean, I think TikTok thinks I'm gay. You know how you like get the algorithms?
Oh yeah. No,
I think
know.
TikTok thinks I am an autistic Black man who's gay.
I love that. I once stumbled onto straight TikTok because it like the algorithm got me wrong, and I was like, "What is wrong?"
That is so funny.
Do not want this. Yeah.
Well, I'm heavy into musical theater TikTok.
Yeah.
So TikTok for sure thinks I'm gay.
I love
thinks
it.
I'm a gay man.
I
like
love
most
it.
of what I'm served is like gay men dancing. But like Broadway dancing, not like TikTok dances.
Right.
Like Broadway dancing.
I love TikTok. Oh my gosh. And like our question is, why is TikTok so addicting?
Yes.
Because it is.
It's so addicting. But why?
Oh my gosh. So I had a theory the other night. I was in bed after a TikTok binge. So I don't keep TikTok on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
I keep it on my iPad, and I'm not allowed to put it on my phone because if I do, I'll never do anything else ever again. So I have, my nights where I can watch TikTok.
Your nighttime allowance of TikTok.
Right. But I always, I'll start at 9 p.m. and be like, okay, I'll be on here for an hour, and then I'll look up and it's 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And
I know.
I was, thinking one night, like, I wonder why that is. And what popped into my mind was, I wonder if it touches some of the same places that gambling does.
Huh.
Some of those addictive processes or potentially addictive processes of the anticipation of you never know what's going to happen next.
Oh my
You
gosh.
don't know what kind of
yeah.
dopamine rush you're going to get next. And so you just kind of keep going and going.
That's so true. It is like a Russian roulette. I mean,
Yeah.
Or what's the game where you pull down on the handle and all the different things pop up?
Right.
Like slots. Like
Yeah.
you are. You're
Right.
you're literally pulling down and you don't know what's going to come up next.
Right. And you could get a disappointing TikTok, but like the next one could be that one that you laugh for hours at.
Yeah.
Like, you never know. I did some research. I Googled. I don't want to call that research. I
Totally.
typed in
I did some
TikTok
Googling.
and gambling. And stuff popped up. Apparently people are researching this, and it seems like, at least preliminarily with the headlines that I read, I didn't actually read the articles, that there is connection there between
Yeah.
those parts of our brains, which is fascinating.
Well, I also want to say, I mean, I think we may have listeners who are like, I don't understand what TikTok is. And if you're not on TikTok, I want to give like a brief explanation because I'm on the upper edges of age-wise in terms of TikTok, Like a lot of people my age don't use it. But it is some teens doing dances. That is a lane of TikTok. But once you start using it and you find things that you like, you get served an algorithm that's very unique. And so like for me, I get served a lot of feminist content. And so it's a lot of women talking about things like emotional labor, equity, things like that. Like I said, I love musical theater. And so I get served like just people singing, it'll be like voice teachers giving notes on someone singing. So it does end up like kind of touching in areas that people like,
Yeah.
And then I find like there's just so much funny content on TikTok. There's a lot of relatable stuff where you're like, oh my gosh, I feel that way too, but I've never heard someone articulate it. So it's just, and I think it's just so freaking creative.
Yes.
So creative.
Yeah. It's so fun what people do on there, both from like the educational side, and the ways that, for better and for worse, like there's both and here.
Yeah.
The spotlight that it's shining on mental health, especially
Yes.
some, diagnoses of ADHD and ADD
Yes.
and like these things, like such important information and misinformation out there.
Yeah.
But just the fun factor.
Yeah.
And the way that algorithm gets dialed in, and all of a sudden you're watching all these videos that feel so particular to your interests and who you are.
Yeah.
It's wild. It's wild the way that works.
I think another aspect of it feeling so addictive is it feels really low commitment. Because the videos are 3 minutes or shorter. Most of them are about a minute. So it feels low commitment. You sit down and you go, I'm going to watch it. Like, I'm going to watch one more 1 minute video feels low commitment. You know, if I was on YouTube and I saw a 20-minute video, I'd probably be like, that's too long. Right. But, you know, those minutes really add up. And then before you know it, you haven't really, I mean, it is, again, that kind of, it's a time gamble. Like, you don't know what you're going to find next or when the ending is. And it ends up sucking you in.
Yeah. And it just goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have it on my phone, I will confess, and I probably should not. I mean,
no judgment. I get so close almost daily to downloading it on my phone.
Yeah.
It's a struggle.
And my kids love it too. And my kids are all on timers, you know. Because I know my own proclivities and, you know, so they get 30 minutes of TikTok a day.
Yeah.
And then it times out.
That's nice. I wish I could figure out a way to time out my phone without me being able to override it.
I know, that's the thing. Well, my boyfriend and I have talked about, like, should we, like, basically monitor each other's phones the way I do to the kids and not tell each other the password. Mm-hmm. We talked about that, which is kind of sad. And we're not talking about it. Let me clarify. I'm not suggesting that for him. I'm suggesting that for myself and vice versa. You know, he's not like, I'd like to monitor your phone. It's more like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I just wasted that much time. I need to give you my password.
Right.
Like,
yeah. I mean, it's like that. Oh, this is so cringy, but like, I don't know if you ever did this, but in like evangelical days when you had like your purity partners.
Oh yeah, totally. It is exactly like that. It's exactly like that. Like, I need TikTok accountability.
Yep. I need to be able to tell all my sins to one person who has all my passwords.
Well, on that, it's funny because on that note, for a while, Sarah James and I, my original co-host with Selfie, we both put this app on our phone that emailed each other our screen time use for the week.
Ooh.
And so it was a little bit of just like, we're going to share our shame with each other in the hopes that it would, you know, make us pull it together, which it didn't. It changed nothing.
It didn't. Those things never work.
No, it changed nothing.
Never. Yeah.
Oh man, it is addicting, but it feels a little harmless. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it's morally neutral? Do you think it, you know, does it lean towards problematic?
I don't know. You know, I am always really sensitive about, you know, playing this game of like technology is ruining everything.
Right.
Because in some ways, like, of course there are negative things to it, but there's so many positives.
Yeah.
I think the one thing where I wonder, and I don't have an answer to this, but where I wonder is the attention span thing.
Oh my gosh. I don't wonder. I do think it's bad.
Yeah.
I do think it's reducing our attention span.
I think so too. Those places of, you know, you say like videos are up to 3 minutes. If I get a 3-minute video on TikTok, I'm like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
It's too long.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
I do think it is shortening our attention span. I think that there is something funky happening with our neural pathways of just that instant gratification and the serotonin hit.
Yep.
I do think that part is problematic.
Yeah. I think I agree with you there.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of good things. So
yeah, there's a lot of good things. And to me, it feels much less toxic than Twitter or Facebook.
Yeah.
Like people aren't having huge fights. Although here's what's so tough is we're sitting here talking about it, but all we can talk about is our own algorithm, our own experience. But like someone who comes on with a bias towards racism is also now going to be fed more racist content.
Totally. And I have been, I mean, even in like as my algorithm was programming, like they gave me videos that were deeply concerning, like right wing.
Oh wow!
Like stuff that, I mean, where I could just tell, like, it was like, oh, you figured out you're a man and that you're probably white. So here's something like this.
Oh, wow.
That felt like somewhat radicalized, at least in my definitions of that. And I was like, oh, it would be so easy for me to go down some kind of white supremacist pathway of where, like, that would be the only thing that I'm seeing.
Yeah. That part is problematic. Yeah. So it's easy to feel, I think it's easy to feel positive towards TikTok when everything I'm being served is very inclusive and, like, you know, it's feminist, it's radical, it's anti-racist, but there is a whole other side to it.
Yeah.
I want to say this too, because we're talking about this. If you do have teenagers, I really encourage you to look at their accounts to see what their algorithm is serving them, because you'll really learn a lot. You might pull up their TikTok and all they're watching is like booty shaking. You might pull it up and find that they are getting, you know, served stuff that is kind of anti-government, anti-military. Like, you just never know, but it's very informative to look at your child's TikTok feed to see what they're being served and then have a conversation about it if it's problematic. Yeah,
it's so important.
All right, well, that is it for this week. I hope you guys will join us over on our Selfie Community Facebook group. Hit us up with any questions that you have about mental health or comments you have about what you're observing in terms of psychology and pop culture. All right.
I feel like I should.
Hey, thanks for listening.
Just a heads up, we're therapists, but we're not your therapists. This podcast is not a substitute for therapy, and by making it, we're not rendering psychological or other professional services. If you need therapy, we recommend you track down someone to help.
Join us online for more of the conversation in our Selfie Community Facebook group or on Instagram at Selfie Podcast.